the Dean of the Faculty of Philosophy, Father John Selvaraj from Arunananda Institute of Philosophy, Madurai, Father Pasius Marak, representing the organizing committee, Sister Jocelyn Rose Eka from St. Albert's Institute of Philosophy, Ranchi, representing JD students community. Thank you, esteemed dignitaries. It is now my privilege to invite Professor Nishant Irudayadasan, Dean of the Faculty of Philosophy, to welcome this august gathering.
Esteemed members of the faculty, beloved students, and honorable guests. With great pleasure, I welcome you all to the Student Colloquium organized by the Faculty of Philosophy at the Pontifical Athenaeum, Jnanadeepa. This event is the first of this kind. For the first time, we have invited students from our affiliated or aggregated institutes to interact with the students of the Faculty of Philosophy at the Pontifical Athenaeum, so that we realize the importance of shared learning and reflection. The theme we explore today, the relevance of philosophy in our time, is both urgent and vital. In an age marked by rapid change and complex challenges, philosophy remains a steady companion, guiding us to think deeply, live ethically, and engage meaningfully with the world. I went through the abstracts of the papers that our paper presenters have given us. I must confess that the papers that they have prepared intend to offer diverse topics that show the breadth and depth of philosophical inquiry. Congratulations to each one of you for putting your efforts, your heart and mind in preparing such wonderful papers. These papers range from examining the relationship between science and religion, seeking ways to overcome historical misunderstandings, to re-examine violence that goes beyond what meets the eye and addresses the structural issues underlying conflict. Several papers confront the challenges of the present age, the phenomenon of the post-truth in politics, the influence of social media on our thinking and identity, and the troubling rise of sophistry in public discourse. Other topics point to the enduring significance of faith and reason working together, the need for just knowledge systems free of exclusion, and the imperative to move toward ecocentric ethics and responsible behavior that respect all life forms. Some papers focus on the theme of war and peace and migration, foregrounding the human dignity that philosophy deeply values. These remind us of philosophy's critical thinking skills needed to foster democracy and build a more just society. This is a timely reminder of philosophy's role in nurturing clarity, confidence, and moral life. As I invite each one of you to engage meaningfully in the presentations and the discussion that follow the presentations, I commend all the students who are presenting papers for their thoughtful engagement. Your work shows philosophy is alive and relevant, and philosophy addresses the great moral, social, and spiritual questions of our time. May this colloquium be a place of lively and enriching dialogue. Let it inspire all of us to continue exploring how philosophy can shape a better future for all of us. Thank you and all the best. Hearty welcome once again.
Thank you, Father Nishan, for your words of cordial welcome. Next, I warmly welcome our President, Professor Dolchin Golareth, to offer the words of felicitation.
Unfortunately, I do not have a prepared speech, so I will speak something spontaneous. So the JD-AAI is organizing its first ever symposium of this kind, and therefore it is a very proud moment for all of us. And I must also let you know that I am also a humble member of the philosophy faculty in the social science, teaching in the social science department. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate our dean for bringing people together and for organizing this event. I would like to congratulate the chief organizer of this program, our renowned Father Stephen Jayard and Pasius, and the student members of the organizing committee, and all the faculty members of JD-AAI and our affiliated and aggregated institutes, and all the students for making this conference or symposium possible. I think we are reflecting on this theme, the relevance of philosophy for us today, at a time when we find a decline in interest in philosophy. If you take a look at the universities worldwide, there seems to be lesser and lesser enrollment in philosophy. There seems to be a little bit of decline in the way the departments are assigning or giving jobs to people who have completed doctorate in philosophy. So there seems to be some sort of a decline, and people are all going for STEM-based courses. This is true even in our country. And I think once upon a time, the University of Madras used to be very prominent for its philosophy department. But some time back, I was just taking a look at its website, and I saw it, the information is right, there is just one faculty member there. And when I was doing my master's in Kerala University in psychology, there was a philosophy department, but they wouldn't get sufficient people even to write the entrance exam. So the philosophy students used to go around and call people, for philosophy, please come and write entrance, you will definitely get seat. So there seems to be, a decline in our country, in the global world, and we can also perhaps ask this question to ourselves. If this philosophy program was not compulsory for our ministry and formation, would we be here? And there are different reasons why there is a decline in philosophy. One, first of all, the education is being driven by job market. And secondly, philosophy doesn't offer you definitive answers. And sometimes you find, at least initially, our students ask you, what is this, Father? What is the point? There are no clear answers. There are different sort of viewpoints. What is the point of studying this philosophy? But then, by now, or you should be knowing by now, that the strength of philosophy is that it doesn't have definitive answers. Life is like that. Life is inviting us to take multiple perspectives. Life is inviting us to ask critical questions. Life is asking us to go into the depth of reality and more primarily into the depth of our own self. And that is what philosophy is doing us. That is to which the philosophy is inviting us. So as we gather here together and contemplate or reflect on this theme, the relevance for philosophy today, let us be aware that philosophy is inviting us to certain depth beyond superficiality so that we become people who are capable of ministering to our country and to the world. Wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Father Dolichen, for your encouraging words. Philosophy thrives when voices rooted in wisdom engage with the questions of our time. I am honored to welcome Father Andrew Francis Oyefum, a PhD scholar at Jnanadeepa, to deliver the keynote address of the day.
Honorable dignitaries in the audience. The privilege of having been delegated as a keynote speaker of this auspicious event of Jnanadeepa and affiliated institutes and integrated institutes colloquium affords me with the great responsibility to ensure the grandeur of this event is facilitated with an appropriated impetus at a kickstart. The time at my disposal doesn't permit me to enter into a comprehensive assessment of the theme of the seminar, the relevance of philosophy today. Hence, I would like to delimit the scope of this reflection by attaching it with the theme of JD 2025, Formation for an Indigenous Church. Accordingly, the theme of this reflection may be formulated as the relevance of philosophy today in the formation for an indigenous church. This theme is very relevant, as President already indicated. Not merely we are all students of philosophy at various degrees, which is only a common elementary denominator of our group, and this is very negligible. But far more deeply, we need to admit the fact that we have become students of philosophy not by choice. Some may confront me stating that no one will be able to progress in learning unless there is no will or desire attached to it. That is very much true. But I would insist that studying philosophy wouldn't have been our objective, our learning process, if our vocations were different. Since we have made a radical choice with regard to our vocation, to be at the service of God and His church, our compliance to do the required study is attached to that choice. And the readiness which corresponds to a will to progress in the academic learning pushes us to dwell in the world of philosophy, and some with more success. Now, as far as our theme is concerned, I can identify three components: philosophy, formation, and indigenous church. The discussion on philosophy centers on the presupposition that it survived in the history revolving around the axis of religion, either by endorsing it, or by negating it, or by sometime even by indifferent with it. The decline of philosophy, as indicated by President, is a testimony to that. When philosophy is detached from religion and theology, it declines. The connection between the religion and philosophy is very much evident from the intellectual background of the prominent philosophers who ushered the destiny of philosophy in the history. Further, I do not enter onto the reflection on formation because it is typically a subject belongs to a domain that do not come under a purview of this project. And the reflection of the indigenous church also belongs to the domain of theology, but though not exclusively. The ripples of sociology surrounds any discussion on the church, and philosophy also come into play a major role in different layers of this enumeration. Hence, I have devoted some space for the reflection on an indigenous church. I would like to take Bertrand Russell as my dialogue partner in discussing philosophy. According to him, philosophy is very much connected with the reason, faith, and science. He argued that the life and the world we call philosophical are the product of two factors. One, inherited religious and ethical conception. And the other, the sort of investigation which one may be called scientific. Individual philosophers have differed widely in regard to the proportions in which these two factors entered into their systems. But it is the presence of both, to some degree, that characterizes the philosophy. Radhakrishnan, a prominent Indian philosopher and author, did not say anything different when he spoke about Indian philosophy. I quote, "Each system of philosophy is an answer to a positive question which its age has put to itself, and when viewed from its own angle of vision, will be seen to contain some truth. The philosophies are not set of propositions, conclusive or mistaken, but the expression or evolution of a mind with which and in which we must live, if we wish to know how the systems shaped themselves. We must live if we wish to know how systems shaped themselves. We must recognize the solidarity of philosophy with history, of intellectual life with social condition." I unquote. Russell further argued that philosophy is something overlapping between theology and science. Like theology, it consists of speculations on matters as to which definite knowledge has so far been unassertable. But like science, it appeals to human reason rather than to authority, whether that of tradition or that of revelation. All definite knowledge belongs to science. All dogma as to what surpassed definite knowledge belongs to theology. But between theology and science, there is a no man's land exposed to attack from both sides. This no man's land belongs to philosophy. Almost all the questions of most interest to speculative minds, such as science, cannot answer, and confidence answers of theologians no longer seem to be as convinced as they did in the former centuries. The business of philosophy is to study the questions for which no answer can be found in laboratories. The questions for which theologians have professed to give definite answers, but definiteness causes the human mind to view them with suspicion. This, thus understood, definite knowledge belongs to science, while all dogmas as to what surpasses the definite knowledge belong to theology, yet interpreting the spaces of science and theology is philosophy. Now, skepticism and critical thinking as a problem. It is evident that philosophy is radically connected with theology and science. However, it is very often perceived as an averse to faith. Many quarters of human culture consider faith and reason as mutually exclusive. This is perhaps due to its affinity towards skepticism and critical thinking. It is to be admitted that there were instances where skepticism and critical thinking have drawn philosophers to atheism. But that is not the whole picture. The discourse on faith does not militate against skepticism and critical thinking of a true philosopher. The skepticism of a philosopher is to be properly understood as a rational resistance against prejudices and incompetent knowledge in pursuit of truth. George Santayana has beautifully articulated it thus, I quote, "Skepticism is an exercise, not a life. It is a discipline fit to purify the mind of prejudice and render it all the more apt when the time comes to believe and to act wisely. And meantime, the pure skeptic need to take no offense at the multiplicity of images that crowd upon him, if he is scrupulous not to trust them, and to assert nothing at their prompting. Skepticism is the chastity of the intellect, as it is shameful to surrender it too soon or to the first comer. There is nobility in preserving it, and coolly and proudly through a long youth, until at last, in the ripeness of instinct and discretion, it can be safely exchanged for fidelity and happiness," unquote. Thus, the affinity towards skepticism that purifies the intellect and critical thinking that is open to truth are all the hallmark of a true philosopher. It reminds us again that philosophy is not different from theology and science in their objective, but distinctively unique from theology and science by its appeal to reason. Hence, it is not fair to state that the horizon of philosophy is limited because of its radical connection with theology and science. It has the wings broad enough to fly high beyond what has been attained, and has the penetrating sharpness to dwell deeper without getting stuck by the parameters of metaphysical structures and epistemical framework. And philosophy is widening its horizon day by day by the long strides taken by its votaries, making it significant, relevant. Today, philosophy is perceived as an abstract and theoretical discipline which upholds profound impact in the contemporary society by providing essential tool for addressing the complex challenges of the modern world. In this regard, it is good to record the survey result recently published by the Journal of American Philosophical Association. They made a comparative study on students who graduated in philosophy and those who do not have philosophy as their major. Their stakeholders were around 60,000 college graduates. According to the study, the philosophy majors rank higher than all the other majors on verbal and logical reasoning. They also tend to display more intellectual virtues such as curiosity and open-mindedness. It is to be underlined that philosophy will be relevant as long as human beings are capable of free speculation. Their actions in innumerable respects have depended upon their theories as to the world and human life as what is good and what is not good. Now I have some reflection on the indigenous church. The philosophical basis of an indigenous church centers on the concept of the church that is deeply rooted in and reflective of the local culture, beliefs, and practices of its community, rather than being dependent on a foreign morals or leadership. This concept is summarized by the framework 3 selves, such as self-governance, self-support, and self-propagation. This refers to the shift of emphasis in perceiving the church from its external other to the internal self, in reference to its origin, sustenance, and expansion. This approach aims to foster a more authentic and sustainable expression of Christianity within a specific cultural context. The self-governance ensures the church leadership, decision-making processes, and overall direction are aligned with the needs and aspirations of the local population. The financial autonomy allows the church to make its own decisions about how to allocate resources and prioritize its activities without being beholden outside influences. A self-propagating indigenous church implies that it should be actively involved in evangelism and a church planning within their own communities and beyond. This involves training and equipping local believers to share their faith to build new congregations. Self-propagation ensures the continued growth and expansion of the church within a specific context. Some theologians also have added a 4th self to this framework called self-theologizing. Self-theologizing emphasizes the importance of allowing local churches to develop their own theological understandings and expressions of faith rooted in their cultural context. Self-theologizing recognizes that the scripture can be understood and lived out in diverse ways, and that local communities should have the freedom to interpret and apply it in their own terms. Thus, indigenous churches try to express Christian faith in ways that are meaningful and relevant to the local culture. This involves adapting worshiping styles, theological language, the ministry approaches to resonate with the values, traditions, and the worldview of the community. Now, the indigenous Catholic Church in India. We have a problem here in determining the stakeholders here, because indigenous Catholic Church is an empty word in India, which has no inherent meaning. This is because, as we all know, the land of pluralism, diversity, unity in diversity is our mantra. But as a matter of fact, the celebration of diversity has evolved itself into a cult of pluralism. At the cost of unity, we celebrate the diversity. And what happened? We Indians and the Catholic Church Indians are spread into patches. In this context, the meaning for the indigenous Catholic Church in India is imported by convention. But in a pluralistic society, conventionalism amounts to conventional pluralism, which leads to epistemical relativism. Accordingly, indigenous Catholic Church in India either may mean the Catholic Church in India as a unified whole, which is indigenous in character, or Catholic Church in India as an umbrella term for the entity constituted by the numerous enclaves which are called indigenous churches. If the first meaning is accepted, we have to deal with the problem of diversity and the threat of power structure that stipulates monoculturalism. We will also have the problem of identifying the indigenous character of this unified whole, because many things that we call cultural in Indian Christian universe do not belong to India in its origin, but belongs to an era of cultural invasion coupled with the political dominance and economic interest in colonial and pre-colonial era. Now, if you accept the second meaning of the church, we have to deal with the problem of unity and the power dynamics that militates against such a unity. Further, the indigenous of these fragmented churches can be recognized only by articulating the ritual, ethnical, tribal, linguistic, caste, and cultural framework, because it is on these bases the churches are searching for their independent identity. Conversing with this binary of unity and diversity is not an easy, but definitely a hermeneutical task of philosophy, and to discern which is the primary term in the mantra, unity in diversity. Here, philosophy has a task ready at hand and has the capacity to conceive the church and mold its alignment. I'm not entering into a concrete discussion on that theme, since it does not come under purview of our theme under discussion, consideration. It is just a reminder that philosophy has a prominent role in the life and activity of the church as a foundation of theology. It is to be affirmed that time and again that our theology stands on philosophical ground, and without a solid philosophical foundation, theology can become unstable, detached from reason, vulnerable to sentimentality, or prone to error. History has proven that only a genuine philosopher can become a true theologian. This justifies the traditional understanding represented by the Latin phrase philosophia ancilia theologiae, which spells out that philosophy is a handmaid of theology. Hence, it is important that a person who is aspiring to be at the service of God and His church is to undergo philosophy as a basic requirement. St. John Paul II beautifully expressed this at the beginning of his Fides et Ratio, that faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. So the first reason we study philosophy is that our theology can be clear, coherent, and true, not just for academic excellence, but for pastoral efficiency. Paul VI, in his Optatum Toscius, the degree on priestly training, envisioned that the net result of training in philosophy should be that the students, correctly understanding the characteristics of the contemporary mind, will be duly prepared for the dialogue with the men of their time. It is at this juncture, it is important to quote John Wesley, a principal leader of revival movement within the Church of England in the 18th century, known as Methodism. In his address to the clergy, Wesley challenged the priests with some posing questions. Can a fool cope with all men that know God and with all the spirit of darkness? No. He will be neither be aware of the devices of Satan nor the craftiness of his children. Wesley insisted that it is necessary for a minister to have first a good understanding, a clear apprehension, a sound judgment, and a capacity of reasoning with some closeness. Otherwise, a minister will remain ignorant of the state of affairs under his care. Further, he added that some acquaintance is necessary with the metaphysics and with some general ground of natural philosophy for the effective ministry. The metaphysics, which has been termed as the second part of logic, is necessitated by the fact that it helps the ministers in clearing their apprehension, without which it is impossible either to judge correctly or to reason closely or conclusively by raising ideas under the general heads. In a world flooded with misinformation, half-truths, and noise, this academic skill is a necessity for personal efficiency. This is because philosophy is the art of thinking clearly and speaking truthfully. It trains the mind to think with clarity, to reason with discipline, to argue without aggression, and speak with both precision and charity. Thus, philosophy enterprises are all about fanning the flame of rational faculty of primordial divine gift to every human person to a level of maturity where the appropriate use of it becomes an aid in life. Thus understood, the traditional definition of philosophy as a love of wisdom may be comprehended as the love of the vision of truth that is very obvious to all of us. In conclusion, I would like to summarize this sharing by bringing your attention to the artwork with the title Thinker by famous French sculptor Augustin Rodin. The statue image is widely used to represent philosophy, thinking, and introspection across the world. Interestingly, this model of this statue is taken from the artwork The Gates of Hell by Rodin himself. The theme of this artwork derives from famous Dante's Inferno, the first part of the epic poem, The Divine Comedy. Everybody knows the story, it's very popular. There are more than 180 figures in that artwork, The Gate of Hell. All are struggling there, and the poet is sitting there meditating on it. So Rodin intending to visualize through that artwork. And he titled the statue in that artwork, The Poet. Later, when he made this statue as a standalone statue, he renamed it as a Poet Thinker. Over the time, it became a separate, universally recognized symbol of contemplation and intellectual, transcending its original context, and came to be called as the Thinker. Now it stands alone, has its own merit, its own aesthetic beauty. The upshot of this story is that philosophy is significant by its own merit and relevant, irrespective of their context, because of this intellectual gratification those who engage in it and the horizon it has endured. But its relevance and significance swells, more swelling, and becomes more appealing to the masses when it operates in specific contexts in which it becomes an agent in transforming the lives of the people. Wishing you everything best, and kudos to all those who worked behind for the success and the smooth functioning of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Andrew, for your profound and enriching address. As a token of our gratitude and appreciation, I now invite Father Lucas, the leader of the coordination committee, to honor Father Andrew with a shawl and a book. With this, the inaugural session finds its meaningful completion. We shall now proceed with the paper presentations. I warmly hand over the stage to Brother Johan for further proceedings.
As we begin with the first session, it's my pleasure to invite Brother Colasso Exter, pursuing his studies in licentiate in philosophy, Pontifical Athenaeum Jnanadeepa, to moderate the first session. We begin by welcoming Brother Matthew and Brother T. Anto Joseph from St. Joseph Institute of Philosophy, Alue. They will present their paper on Interfacing Science and Religion, Resolving Epistemic Tensions. Kindly welcome them with a huge round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. I warmly welcome you all for the first session of this paper, presentations. In this session, we will have 3 papers presented, and each of the presenters will have 20 minutes to present their work, followed by a 10-minute of discussion and questions. A warning bell will be given 5 minutes before the end of the allotted time as a signal for the presenter to conclude. Without much further delay, let us begin. Our first paper for this session is titled Interfacing Science and Religion, Resolving Epistemic Tensions. I now invite the presenters, Matthew T. and Anto Joseph, to share their work with us.
Respected fathers, sisters, and dear brothers, good morning. I, Brother Anto Joseph, together with Brother Matthew, deem it a privilege to present a topic on the theme Interfacing Science and Religion, Resolving Epistemic Tensions, on behalf of St. Joseph Institute of Philosophy, Alve. Now, I am going to present my presentation on the topic Interfacing Science and Religion, Resolving Epistemic Tensions. As introduction, I start with a quoting from the famous scientist Albert Einstein. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. From this quotation, we can get a complementarity of science and philosophy. Throughout the history of the world, science and religion have shaped civilizations, guided moral frameworks, and expanded humanity's understanding of the universe, but are often portrayed as opposing forces. These 2 domains have been at the center of conflicts, center of intense debates and cultural shifts. Yet beneath the apparent conflicts lies a deeper and more nuanced relationships that invites dialogue, not conflict. In the encyclical Fides et Ratio, St. John Paul II says that there is thus no reason for competition of any kind between reason and faith. Each contains the other, and each has its own scope for action. Now I am going to present the objectives, scope, and and methodologies of science and philosophy. The core difference lies in the questions they seek to answer. Science always aims to explain how the universe works. It focuses on the mechanism, process, and natural laws governing reality. On contrary, religion attempts to provide answer to why the universe exists, to deal with questions of ultimate causes, purpose, and meaning. The scope of science is the natural physical world that can be observed and measured. The methodology followed by the science is observation, experimentation, and evidence. It claims must be testable and can change with new proofs. But for religion, the scope is a spiritual realm, questions of meaning, morality, and purpose. The methodology followed by the religion is faith, sacred texts, traditions, and personal spiritual experience. Now, I am going to the core section of this presentation. We are trying to deal the presentation by following a model given by the famous philosopher Ian J. Barber, a pioneer in the philosophy of science. In his book, When Science Meets Religion, he designed a model that brings the relationship between science and religion. In this book, he explained 4 models: conflict, independence, dialogue, and integration. In the conflict model, he explained that science and religion are in opposition. In independence model, science and religion address different questions. In dialogue, science and religion can converse and clarify boundaries. And at last, in integration, science and religion can be synthesized into more comprehensive worldview. The first model is the conflict model. In this conflict model, there are 2 parts: historical analysis and philosophical analysis. In the history, there are different conflicts arises between science and religion. For example, the Galileo affair, evolutionism, biblical literalism, etc. In this presentation, we are focusing on evolutionism and biblical literalism. Evolution theory. According to the theory of evolution, all species of organisms have descended from common ancestors, and that the difference between them arises through a gradual process of change over long periods of time. This change occurs primarily through mechanisms such as natural selection, mutation, genetic drift, and gene flow. For them, the origin of species happened mere chance, not through a divine intervention. They were often atheists who make fun of the biblical interpretation of the narration in the book of Genesis. Darwinism challenged the traditional Christian view of creation, leading to significant debate about the origin of humanity and the role of divine interventions in the natural world. As an ideology, Church rejects the evolution theory, but as a scientific term, Church accepts it. And the next one is, on the other side, we have a Protestant evangelical Christianity who rejected the evolution theory, and they came forward with biblical literalism. According to biblical literalism, it is a tendency prevalent among Christians, dominations, who follow the dogma of sola scriptura. This approach became controversial when it resulted in the literal reading of the first few chapters of the book of Genesis, chapter 1 to 11, considered as a primeval history. So, concerning the origin of the world, despite the linguistic, exegetical scripture research showing that the original Hebrew text of the Old Testament portions is elegantly poetic and not meant to be read literally by a rational mind, evangelical Christian groups literally take biblical account of creation and finds themselves at war with those who advocate for purely scientific worldview. And we move to the philosophical analysis. In philosophical analysis, we deal with logical positivism and scientism. Logical positivism, arising from the Vienna Circle in the early 20th century, it argued that a statement is only meaningful, it has an empirical basis. This philosophy sought to eliminate metaphysics and theology, dismissing religious truth as meaningless because they couldn't be scientifically verified. While logical positivism declined, as continuation of logical positivism, scientism arose. According to scientism, it is a philosophy of scientism holds that the scientific method is the only valid way to acquire knowledge. It treats religious claims such as the existence of God as testable scientific hypotheses that have failed. It is the acceptance of scientific theory and scientific methods as applicable in all fields of inquiry about the world, including morality, ethics, art, and religion. New atheism, a movement from the early 21st century, popularized by figures like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, is a popular manifestation of scientism, relying on it to mount aggressive critiques against religion. Now let's look at the four horsemen. The first one is Richard Dawkins, who is a scientist, and the second one is Sam Harris, a scholar and neuroscientist. The third one is Daniel Dennett, a philosopher, and the last one is Christopher Hitchens, a writer. They together known as the Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen of New Atheism, popular about the rejection of Christianity, but they are even criticized by the atheists because their views are considered as irrational. Now I conclude my presentation and hand over to Brother Thomas to deal with the third and fourth, the dialogue and integration models. Thank you.
Good morning to one and all. Thank you, Brother Andrew, for your insights. So now I would like to continue with where Brother Andrew left off. So I'm basically starting with, so Brother Andrew took you through to two of the main aspects of the conflict model, which is Darwinism and the other one being biblical literalism. So I want to just gradually take you through the complementary relationship that's possible between science and religion. And I'll be mainly addressing the dialogue and integration models. To start off, I would like to take you through two philosophical attempts in the late 20th century undertaken by two philosophers by the name of Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn. So Karl Popper gave a radical different methodology to the way scientific methodology should be considered. He's the first one to bring out with the verification, he's the first one to deconstruct the verification principle and bring out the principle of falsification. So the principle of falsification basically says that all scientific theories can be considered absolute only if they can be falsified based on new evidence or fresh evidence. So Karl Popper, through his principle of verification, argued that the claims of logical positivism are flawed, and for him, scientific theories cannot be absolutely verified, but can only be cautiously accepted until some fresh evidence falsifies it. Popper's theory was a strong challenge to the claims of logical positivist and also of new atheist. And he even pointed out to many of the limitations of science. This was at a time, we must remember, this was at a time when people thought that science could answer everything, that science is absolute. And this was also followed by another philosopher by the name of Thomas Kuhn. Through his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, he came up with the theory that in science there are certain paradigm shifts. For example, you start with the Newtonian paradigm, which is a classical mechanical model of science, and then you slowly progress to the period of Einstein, where he brought out with the theory of relativity, which again had a seismic radical paradigm shift, which was again followed by the current, in the current scenario, we've got people like Stephen Hawking and so many other people who even expanded the quantum physics and talk about different multiple dimensions of reality. So these two philosophers were the ones who challenged mostly the claims of the logical positivism and scientism towards the end of the 20th century. Now, before I introduce to you the core of my part, I would like to take you through two surveys. First one being conducted by Science Direct in 2023. So, as you can go through this survey, this survey was conducted on 669 religious and non-religious people in the United States, and they were divided into two: the people with a faith mindset and the people with a science mindset. And it was found out that the people with a faith mindset often agree that science and religion can be compatible, as in they both can learn from each other. But it's often people who have a science mindset, who think that science and religion are conflicting or they are mutually exclusive. In another survey conducted by Veritas Forum, the survey basically addressed the question the question was addressed to the youth, and they basically asked if science and religion are conflicting with each other. And through that survey, they found out that about 70% of the youth agree that science and religion are in fact in conflict. But by proper analysis based on that survey, it was found out that only 11% of Americans belonging to a religion denied the findings of modern science. And a majority of scientists who took part in the survey, the young scientists who took part in the survey, believed in a God or a higher power. Now, let me take you through the two models, two epistemic solutions that I'm suggesting to you. The first one is by the famous American analytical philosopher Alvin Plantinga. He is a Calvinist, and his philosophy is called Reformed epistemology, because he basically sees that the epistemic approach in scientism and logical positivism is basically a wrong attitude to epistemology. It's a wrong kind of epistemology, which is why he named his philosophy Reformed epistemology. And he is very popular, and he is popular for his works in philosophy of religion, epistemology, metaphysics, and Christian apologetics. And those are some of his influential works. And we'll be going through some of those books. In his first book, one of his first memorable books called The God and Other Minds, he is of the opinion that belief in the existence of God is in the same boat as belief in any other minds. So he's basically saying that if you can believe in any other scientific mind, the belief in God is also rational. So he's basically saying that belief in God is basic, and you don't need any justification for that. And he does this by criticizing classical foundationalism, which is of the opinion that for a faith to be rational, it needs to have a foundational basis. And he bases his Reformed epistemology on John Calvin's doctrine of sensus divinitas, which basically says that you have an innate sense of God in you. So for him, belief in God is basic. And he challenges the claims of classical foundationalism in doing so. And in one of his very recent works, this was in 2011, one of his last works called Where the Conflict Really Lies, Science and Religion and Naturalism, he makes the claim that the real conflict is not between religion and the theory of evolution, but between naturalism and evolution. And by naturalism, he refers to the new atheist, as explained by Brother Anto, who claim that this is his argument. So he basically says that in evolution requires a modification of behavior due to natural selection and random mutation. So if there is a modification of behavior, it would lead to a modification in your cognitive faculties. If there's a modification in your cognitive faculties over time, it would basically mean that your cognitive faculties are not reliable. And we know that our belief system is formed by our cognitive faculties, which in turn makes the whole argument irrational. So he's of the opinion that theistic evolutionists are more rational than atheistic naturalist evolutionists. And this is what he synthesized from all his work. This is what he actually thinks on the relationship between science and religion. He's of the opinion that they can coexist and complement each other rather than being in deep conflict. So he's the one who So let me bring to your memory the E.N.G. Barber's the 4 models. So he's the one who advocates for the dialogue model. So he basically addresses the deep conflict, perceived historical conflict between science and religion, and he proposes the dialogue model. Now I'm going to introduce to you another model by famous English theoretical physicist and philosopher. He's also an Anglican priest by the name of John Polkinghorne. He was a professor of mathematics at the University of Cambridge, and he was later ordained as an Anglican priest. So he's someone who has both a religion as well as a scientific background. So through one of his first books, Series Talk, Science and Religion in Dialogue, he claims that science affords us both science and religion can help each other and improve its insights. So science has certain limitations to understanding the religion, understanding the worldview perspectively, or understanding the reality holistically. So it can use the help of religion in doing so. And at the same time, science can help religion have a better understanding of our cosmos. And his philosophy is basically called critical realism. This is not an original philosophical concept introduced by him. This is originally proposed by Roy Bhaskar. And critical realism basically says that it aims to bridge the gap between scientific investigation and religious comprehension. It highlights that both domains can offer valuable insights into the nature of reality. He insisted that religion, like science, is concerned with the search for truth about reality, though each addresses different dimensions of that reality. Science investigates the physical structure of the world, while religion seeks to articulate its ultimate meaning and purpose. And this is one of the approaches that he suggests, and he made this claim while receiving his 2002 Templeton Prize. So he puts forward this analogy of binocular approach. So as you guys know, binoculars have 2 lenses. And just like how only with one lens you can't probably see what's in front of you, similarly, you need both lenses of science and religion in order to have a comprehensive or a holistic view of reality. And this is the model for science and religion that he proposes. He starts with the dialogue model and gradually moves towards the integration model. So he basically takes off where Alvin Plantinga leaves it and moves to the integration model. He's someone who advocates for a worldview where both science and religion can enhance each other and work together to improve our understanding of reality. And these are some of the criticisms that are made against both these philosophers. Plantinga is often criticized for his circular reasoning, and John Polkinghorne is criticized for his God of the gaps fallacy. He often tries to fill the gaps that science is not able to explain with God. And Plantinga basically makes his argument within the same worldview or within the same system. He doesn't take into account perspectives from other disciplines. He's more someone who keeps arguing within the same circle, and they're both criticized for the fallacy of circular reasoning and the God of the gaps fallacy. And these are some of the strategies that I suggest for improving the relationship between science and religion. First, we need to realize that they are complementary disciplines. There needs to be dialogue, and there also needs to be an open-minded approach. So what we truly need is symbiosis of science and religion, especially in an increasingly pluralistic and inclusive contemporary society. Religion has a crucial role to play. Religion and science must heal its wounds of the past and must look forward for fruitful, critical dialogue where each informs and challenges the other. And with that, I remain. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew and Anto, for your insightful presentation on the paper Interfacing Science and Religion, Resolving Epistemic Tensions. The floor is now open for a 10-minute question and answer session. I encourage the participants to keep their questions short and precise. Okay, just to start off with, I have a question in mind. Supposing an atheist comes to you and asks you for evidence, like he believes in science, but he's an atheist, he doesn't believe in God. So based on your resolving issues that you have dealt with by reformed epistemology and dialogue, how would you answer such an atheist?
The scientific method basically requires evidence. But the thing about, as Karl Popper says, this evidence keeps on changing from time to time. For example, the evidence that Newton used is not the evidence that Einstein used. It's not the same evidence that Stephen Hawking uses, because they are using different paradigms. So even evidence keeps on evolving. And religion has to do with meaning and purpose and what's immaterial. It doesn't deal with it has a material dimension, certainly the immaterial influences the material, but it's more has to do with the immaterial part of reality, and it's science duty. It is actually science's duty to inform religion on what's actually happening, on how the world works, but the religion's duty is to inform us on why there is even a world, why the world exists. So it's two different aspects, and they can both inform each other and improve their understanding of reality.
Any questions?
Thank you for your insightful presentation. I'd like to ask this question, or more like reflection maybe. Today when we think about our world, this AI and such an advancement in technology, and on the other side, more and more people leaving the church or not coming for the church services in our churches. So people seem to be moving away from God and faith, these kind of things. So where do you think we as a world or as humanity, or for that matter take our own church, are we coming closer, or do you think more and more there is no this interfacing that you are inviting people for? Your reflection?
So basically, one of the reasons why most of the people leave the church is because they might be scandalized by what's happening by those who represent the church, and it doesn't really have to do with the contents of the faith, especially when it comes to Catholic faith. Catholic faith has both a rational side as well as a mystical side. But I think with regards to science and religion, I think Pope John Paul II said historically, when he was introducing the Pontifical Academy of Science, he says that just like how it's actually a radical method, and I don't know how far we have come to using this method in our theologizing. So he basically says that just like how metaphysics and philosophy was the basis for theologizing a couple of centuries back, in today's world we need to use science in order to be able to theologize. And we've got lots of examples within our church. We've got the famous Jesuit Teilhard Chardin, and so many others who have been attempting to do that, to theologize based on even the theory of evolution, for example. Theory of evolution, you find minute forms of theory of evolution in the theologies of people like Saint Augustine, Gregory of Nyssa. It's always been there. For example, Augustine talks about creatio continua. Even Gregory of Nyssa also talks on similar notes. And it's often, I think the perceived conflict often came through from the Protestant side, because they are more reliant on scripture. They literally take the scripture. There's less of a reliance on magisterium and tradition for them. I'm not criticizing them, but the reality is it's actually from their part that there's more of a dialogue between science and religion rather than from our part. So that also has to be appreciated. So I think you can certainly dialogue with our youth today through science and with the theology which has a strong basis on modern science. And there are so many, I think, so many theories in quantum physics, such as quantum entanglements, quantum superposition, which supports so many of the miracles that's talked about in New Testament and in the Bible. So I don't think we have to fear science. If science addresses truth and religion addresses truth, they're both pointing to the same thing, and they both address the same objective truth. So I think it's mostly fear that prevents us from using science for theologizing. Thank you.
We can accommodate another question.
Yes, religion is perfected by philosophy, and philosophy is perfected by religion. So, with these two major topics, can we be strong in our knowledge, or we need to gain something more about including in this? Religion is perfected by philosophy, and philosophy is perfected by religion. So, in order to be strong in our understanding, knowledge, is it sufficient, or we need to gain something more that we may become more competent in our understanding?
So the thing is, not just religion, even science has a philosophical basis. For example, the theory of evolution was not put forward by Charles Darwin. It has its origins in Greek philosophy. Even most of the scientific theories have a philosophical basis. Of course, philosophy has a role to play because that's where ideas are formed. And religion and science both must rely on philosophy for getting an idea for conceptualizing. They need a basis. That basis should always be philosophy. So philosophy is always relevant. But from our paper, what we are trying to say is scientific perspective also should be taken into account while theologizing. Philosophy certainly has a role to play. Without philosophy, most of us would be leading a depressed life. Philosophy is what gives us meaning. Philosophy is what gives us solace. So philosophy certainly has a role to play in both the disciplines.
Last question. Please make it short. Please make a question short.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. You were explaining about God of the gaps. So sometimes it's right and sounds it is perfect that sometimes we don't have explanation for something happening in the world. We tend to say that God would be the reason for that, or we say that God would be the cause for that. So sometimes it sounds apt that God would be the reason for that. So would you explain more about God of the gaps fallacy?
So God of the gaps fallacy is basically it's mostly used by God of the gaps is mostly used by religious people and trying to fill certain gaps in science. As I explained before, science often have this tendency of going through paradigm shifts. For example, the Newtonian paradigm shifts is not precisely a continuation. The Einsteinian paradigm shift is not precisely a continuation of the Newtonian paradigm shift. So the science often tries to the religious people often tries to use God to fill that gap, and that's what religious people that's what science criticizes us for. But if it's something, again, it's actually a misunderstanding of what the methodology of science and religion is. Because religion, as Brother Andrew previously said, religion basically deals about meaning and why we even exist, the meaning of our existence, about dealing with the objective realities that are immaterial, and so on. And science on the other hand, tells us about how the universe works. So let science do its thing and religion do its thing, but both science and religion can help each other and enhance each other. Just like how John Keynote suggests, what we need is a binocular approach. We need both the lenses to see the reality better.
So once again, I thank Matthew and Anto for their wonderful presentation of the paper. Now we move to the next paper presentation.
Thank you, brothers, for your wonderful paper presentation. As a token of our appreciation, now I invite Brother Joseph Johnson of third year philosophy to kindly present mementos to the speakers. Next, let us warmly welcome Brother Kishore Suresh and Brother Jasbir Singh from Arulananda Institute of Philosophy, Madurai. They will present their paper on Reconceptualizing Violence Beyond Armed Conflicts, a Zakian Perspective. Kindly show your appreciation and welcome them with a round of applause.
Okay, so now we move on to our second paper titled Reconceptualizing Violence Beyond Armed Conflicts, a Zakian Perspective. I invite the presenter Kishore Suresh and Jasbir Singh to present their paper.
So, good morning, my respected dignitaries, fathers, brothers, and sisters. So, before begin my presentation, I would like to thank JD-AAI Institute for giving us this platform to present our paper. So, welcome to our presentation on the paper Reconceptualizing Violence Beyond Armed Conflicts, a Zakian Perspective. I am Kishore and my partner is Jasbir. We have divided the paper into two main parts. I will be covering the theoretical part, which dwells into Shakespearean framework, while Jasbir will handle the practical part, applying these ideas to real-world examples and also the implications. Our paper is grounded in the work of Slavoj Žižek, a prominent Slovene philosopher and cultural critic, a senior researcher at the University of Ljubljana's Department of Philosophy. His work, heavily influenced by psychoanalytic theories of Jack Lacan and the philosophy of Marxism, challenges to look beyond the surface of what we call violence. His core ideas revolve around exposing the hidden structural and symbolic violence that he argues is inherent in capitalism and other social systems. So now get into our paper. In our contemporary world, it's easy to fall into the trap of understanding violence primarily through its most obvious forms like armed conflicts, criminal acts, and terrorism. These visible aggressions are undeniably devastating, but they often overshadow a deeper, more complex reality where violence operates right in front of us, yet largely goes unnoticed. While our traditional ways of looking at violence, like the Oxford Dictionary's definition as a behavior of involuntary physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something, focus on direct identifiable harm, this can hide the underlying mechanisms that cause profound societal damage. Historically, philosophical thought has also linked violence to the suppression of will, freedom, and desire, and concepts like via distinct from dynamics. More recently, the socialist John Galton offered a foundational framework that helps us move beyond the limited view. Galton distinguishes between direct violence, which is visible and has a clear perpetrator, and structural violence, which is the insidious harm embedded within social structures themselves. Galton later introduced cultural violence that legitimize direct and structural violence and make them seem acceptable. Building on this, the philosopher Slavoj Zizek takes the argument a step further. When we typically think about violence in terms of finding clear perpetrators and victims, which in the realm of what Zizek calls subjective violence, he argues that this is just the tip of the iceberg. This paper examines Zizek's philosophical work, subjective and objective violence, and then apply this framework to contemporary conflicts and global systems, exploring the ethical and political implications of these preconceptualizations. Frameworks of Zizek. For Zizek, violence is much more than what we can simply observe. In his famous work, Violence, Six Sideways Reflection, he fundamentally reshapes how we understand it. His classification of violence isn't a rigid definition, but a dynamic interplay that includes the dialectics of subjective and objective violence. Subjective violence is the most visible and commonly understood type. In violence, Zizek points out that we typically think of violence as criminal acts, terrorism, and civil disorder, war, or personal aggression like murder or rape. This visible violence is frequently sensationalized by media and political discourses, which frame it as an isolated problem, thereby preventing a critical examination of systemic conditions that actually produce it. Trying to fix subjective violence without addressing the invisible force behind it is like trying to prune a weed without dealing with its roots. Objective violence stands in prime contrast to subjective violence. It largely invisible, lacks a clear agent, and often goes completely unacknowledged. For Zizek, objective violence is made up of two interconnected forms: symbolic violence and systematic violence. Symbolic violence is found in the very meaning making of language itself, reflecting violence embodied in language and its form. This means the violence goes beyond just the words we see. It's in the very structure of words and how we create meaning. This understanding suggests that symbolic violence operates at unconscious level, shaping desires and perceptions and potentially dehumanizing individuals by naturalizing existing power relations. Systemic violence, often called the dark matter of violence, refers to the frequently catastrophic consequences that come from the smooth, normal functioning of our economic and political systems. This is the violence of normality. It is the harm caused by the very system designed to maintain order, often appearing as a natural and unavoidable side effect. This type of violence covers a huge range of issues where people suffer and die as an outcome of our economic and political structures, not from a specific act of aggressions. According to Zizek, this is the most dangerous form of violence. He links this form of violence to the inherent logic of capitalism, describing it as a mad, self-enhancing circulation of capital, where the speculative dance of capital can determine the fate of entire populations with profound indifferences to its social impact. The key here is the anonymity of the agent. This form of violence is not caused by a specific individual's ill will, but by the invisible hand of the system itself, making it difficult to assign blame or responsibility. To illustrate this, Zizek discusses how millions of deaths in Democratic Republic of Congo due to political and economic issues were overshadowed by events like the 9/11 incident. He attributed this to a filtering machine that makes certain suffering seems less important due to underlying cultural, ideological, and economic consideration. This also includes Zizek's critique of philanthropy as key example of how symbolic violence operates to conceal and legitimize economic exploitation. This type of philanthropy, he argues, is a super-ego blackmail, allowing developed countries to offer aid and loans while avoiding responsibility for the subsequent miserable situation in undeveloped countries. This is really highlighting how trying to fix symptoms can actually perpetuate underlying systemic violence by legitimizing the system itself. So by this, I give this platform to Jasbir.
Good morning, everyone. As already the paper is being introduced by Brother Kishore, so let me take you to the practical part of this paper. Zizek, a contemporary philosopher and culture critic, broadens our understanding of violence by introducing three interconnected forms: subjective violence, objective violence, and symbolic violence. These categories allow us to understand not just overt conflict, but also the deeper systemic injustices and underpin everyday life. Using this framework, we can examine how seemingly unrelated global issues, wars, insurgencies, and humanitarian efforts are all connected through hidden forms of violence. The Ukraine conflict analysis of overt and covert violence. The 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine is a clear case of subjective violence, the kind that dominates headlines. Bombings of cities, missile strikes on civilian infrastructure, and intense fighting are all highly visible and provoke global condemnation. However, Zizek's theory draws our attention to objective violence, the background conditions that made this war possible. Decades of geopolitical tension, especially NATO's expansion after the Cold War, created a security dilemma, which some scholars argue provoked Russia's aggressive action. Beyond the battlefield, the war has caused systemic violence on a global scale. Disrupted food exports from Ukraine have tragic shortage, especially in North Africa and the Middle East. The European Parliament reported that up to 25 million tons of wheat indeed to be replaced globally. This impact is severe but anonymous. There is no direct offender when a family in Egypt cannot afford bread, yet their suffering is clearly linked to the war and the fragile system it disrupted. Terrorism and insurgency, Naxalite movements in India. The Maoist or Naxalite insurgency in India is another example where Zizek's concept of violence is useful. The media and state often focus on subjective violence, Naxalite attacks on police, assassination, and spottage. These acts are sensationalized as red terror, reinforcing the view that Maoists are irrational threats to national security. However, this framing hides the deeper objective violence that fuels the conflict. This insurgency primarily occurs in areas inhabited by Adivasis who have suffered systemic oppression for decades. Their displacement for industry projects like dams, mines, and factories is rarely seen as violent, yet it has devastated entire community. Though they represent only 8.6% of India's population, Adivasis account for over 40% of people replaced by so-called development. This form of systemic violence is structural and continuous, built into policies that prioritize economic growth over human dignity. Symbolic violence also plays a key role. The state portrays this project as being in the national interest, while depicting Adivasi traditions and resistance are primitive or anti-development. When tribal communities resist, they are labeled anti-national, which justifies the use of force against them. So socialist Nandini Sundara has shown government-backed militia like the Salvajudan were used to burn villages and recollect entire population, all under the claim of protecting civilians. World organizations and the violence of humanitarian governance. Zizek's critique of liberal communist can also be expanded to global institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. While these organizations claim to propose stability and development, they have often acted as agents of objective violence, especially through structure adjustment programs, economic reforms forced on developing countries as loan conditions.
We have 5 minutes.
Implications and significance. Zizek's expanded theory of violence pushes us to think how we understand peace, justice, and our role within systems that cause harms. His framework has practical and ethical implications for how we respond to conflict in the modern world. Zizek's concept of violence gives us a powerful lens to understand today's global conflicts. It shows us that what we often see as peace or progress may hide deeper forms of harm. By looking at cases like Ukraine, the Naxalite movement, and global aid programs, we can see that violence often begins long before the first bullet is fired. While his theory has limitations, it challenges us to go beyond surface level solutions and confront the real structures that cause suffering. To build a more just world, we must address the invisible violence in our economics, governments, and even our language. And this just react to the explosions that finally make it visible. Thank you, I remain.
Thank you, Kishore and Jaspir, for your thought-provoking presentations. Now we will take some time for the question and answers session. Please make sure your questions are short and please raise your hands.
Thank you, brothers, for your wonderful presentation. As you are presenting, I just got a kind of question that you rightly pointed out that there is an invisible hand behind a physical violence. So, and we also know there is a prominent problem across the nation. And just would like to be brief. A decade ago, there was no problem with the people to adapt with others' culture, with others' language. But now, all of a sudden, everybody is trying to secure their position that they want to preserve their culture and preserve their language, not only in the nation at large, but in the basic, but in the village, rural area also, they are doing like that. So my question is, now the people, a huge majority of the people are aware that there is an invisible hand behind this kind of, inciting violence. They know that there is an invisible hand, but still they want to hold on to this kind of conflict. So what is your thought about the people who knows that it can incite violence, and behind this there is a political agenda, and behind this there is a kind of what you call political gain. But still people know, and still they want to hold it. So how would you like to deal with these people?
So, brother, thank you for your question. It was very wonderful. So, see, symbolic violence and systemic violence. Both are, we cannot say it is created by someone. It is within our system. You say people, they still hold on to this symbolic violence and systemic violence. You see, people also the part of the symbolic and systemic violence. They should know their responsibility, that they also working. If something harm happening in the Western countries like wars or even in the terrorist acts, it is all interconnected. We also have take part in this invisible hand. So what is the best thing we can give is we should aware our role. That Zizek also told in his book Violence, that when we see something violence is happening, we should not first act. We should be silent, and we should study what is the root cause of everything. It is not the philosophy of utopia where the perfect peace we can attain. It is like SDG, like Sustainable Developmental Goals or Millennium Developmental Goals. It is just confronting the practical issues. We cannot attain a perfect peace, but we can confront the real world situations often behind this. Without addressing the root cause of all this violence, we cannot deal with the subjective violence. We may deal with the subjective violence, but what is behind the subjective violence, symbolic violence and systemic violence will come out in another way. Maybe in another form, it can take its root as a symbolic, systemic violence.
Maybe the last question.
This is Sagar. So I have actually two questions. First one is, do you think that this Zizekian perspective of violence and conflict can be applied in our Indian context, looking at the various reality, the happenings of the country? And second one is, when you talked about the conflicts related to subjective, objective violence, when we talk about climate change at present, which is a hot topic in the world at global level, do you think that also can be accommodated in Zizekian perspective of conflict and violence?
So your first question is, we can apply this violence everywhere. If you see in the introduction, you can see wherever there is a mad, self-enhancing dance of capital, then wherever there is a capital, we can apply this three violences. India is not exceptional. Though we can see subjective violence like terrorist attacks in Maoist, which is explained in the presentation. Behind this, you can see the invisible lag of the corporates, which they want to acquire more natural resources for the capital. I think I have answered. And next one is climate change. Climate change also, yeah, we can confront even the climate change. When it comes to the sphere of political and economic structures, we can confront this violence. But if it is purely in the natural form, whether if the climate is by natural, we cannot do anything. But if it is politicized or for the economic structures like that, if they have some issues on violence behalf of that, then it comes to the sphere of Zizekian perspective.
So once again, thank you Kishore and Jasbir for your wonderful presentation. Now we shall move to the next paper.
Thank you, brothers, for sharing your insightful papers with us. As a sign of gratitude, I request Brother Rocky of third year philosophy to distribute the mementos to the speakers. Next, we are pleased to welcome Brother Arun Kumar and Brother Alvin D. from Pontifical Athenaeum Jnanadeepa Institute of Philosophy. Their topic is Philosophy, a Beacon for the Modern Youth. Let us graciously welcome them with a heartfelt round of applause.
So, Brother Arun and Albin, stage is yours.
Good morning, one and all gathered here. I'm sure all of you would have experienced a dark night. I mean, a low phase of life wherein you asked yourself what to do next, what is going to be my future. In a special way, modern youth, in spite of all technologies and facilities available, feel lost the meaning and purpose of life. Arun Kumar and myself, Albin, stand in front of you to show philosophy is a beacon for the modern youth. Philosophy is not just to be studied in books, but to be lived. It is a way of thinking, understanding, and living. It uses reason and logic to explore reality and to answer the fundamental questions of life, like who am I? Why am I here? What is right and wrong? What is the purpose of my life? The word philosophy means love of wisdom. This wisdom is not something we get automatically. It comes through experiences, reflections, and by asking meaningful questions. A practical approach to philosophy can help us connect better with real life. It allows us to face challenges with a clear mind and a strong heart. It is an ongoing journey that helps us know ourselves and understand the world better. In contemporary society, a significant number of young people experience confusion and heightened levels of stress in their daily lives. A 2019 Pew Research study reported that 70% of surveyed US adolescents identified stress as a major concern. The primary sources of this stress were attributed to academic performance by 68%, social media influence by 45%, concerns regarding physical appearance by 47%, and the pressure to attain physical strength by 41%. Questions like, what am I doing with my life? Or is this all life about? Are becoming common. Many youths feel lost and directionless. In such a situation, philosophy can be a guiding light. It helps us not only to think deeply, but also to live more purposefully. It teaches us how to deal with emotions, make ethical choices, and understand what truly matters. According to the UN report 2025, India's population has reached 146.39 crore. 65% of populations are under age of 35. From the days of India's freedom struggle to till today, the role of youth has been very important and praiseworthy. But in today's times, youth are often referred to as youth in turmoil, unrest among youth, or even angry young men. The reasons behind this unrest are many: corruption, unemployment, population pressure, lack of quality education, drug addiction, dowry, and social inequality. These problems directly affect the younger generation. Many of them become victims of depression, anxiety, and hopelessness. At the end of the day, they are left wondering, what is life for me? Over time, these problems become part of their everyday life, disturbing their peace and happiness. The continuous use of mobile phones creates a strong dependency, and this is called nomophobia. Studies show that the 75% of people who are dependent on mobiles do not get even 7 hours of proper sleep. This is a major health concern. To address this dependency, mobile use should be regulated with discipline. Many institutions also recommend time-bound usage patterns as preventive measures. Among youth aged 15 to 29, mobile ownership is found to be 95.5% in rural areas and 77.66% in urban areas, according to Kritika Sujansha in the Economic Times, published on May 29, 2025. According to the NSSO's 2025 telecom survey, mobile usage among youth has increased to 97.1%, up from 94% in the year 2022 to 2023. The ESR 2024 rural survey states that 82.2% of rural youth know how to use smartphones, and among them 57% use them for academic purposes, while 76% engage in social media. By spending long hours on social media, they obviously lose sleep, and their physical as well as mental health are at stake. Another problem is what they learn from social media. Every man-made invention carries both positives and negatives. Even recent films tend to focus more on violence than meaningful content. Youngsters learn about violence and horror from films, short clips, and other resources. Recently, a Malayalam movie named Marco, starring Unni Mukundan, depicted methods of killing and cruelty. Another recent release, Coolie, starring Rajinikanth, provided yet another example by showing a new invention through which countless lives could be destroyed with ease. What are modern youth expected to learn from such portrayals? What lessons are school students likely to draw from them? Even the Kerala government has suggested that the film industry reconsider its themes. We already have a censor board, review committees, and production groups. Yet, such genres of movies continue to be released. What is the effect of these trends? Due to a lack of sleep, students cannot concentrate in class and their academic performance suffers. According to the Economic Survey 2020-24 to 25, national dropout rates are 1.9% in the primary education, 5.2% in secondary education, 14.2% in higher secondary education. It is not necessary to assume that social media alone has caused these dropout rates, but social media is certainly one of the factors that must be considered. A second major issue is the psychological impact. Modern youth are increasingly unwilling to step out of their private worlds. In Kerala, a 12th standard girl strangled her brother with a belt because he had taken her mobile phone without permission. In another case, a schoolboy slit his mother's throat because she refused to recharge his mobile. Where do such violent reactions come from? Are they so psychologically fragile that they cannot control their emotions? From where have they learned these instant destructive solutions? With these questions, I now pave the way for Arun Kumar, my friend, to take over.
Thank you, Alvin. In the relentless pursuit of grades, physical appearance, and social media validation, modern youth often neglect a deeper examination of their lives. Socrates' famous saying that the unexamined life is not worthy remains profoundly relevant today. By urging self-examination, Socrates invites young people to reflect critically on their motives, desires, and choices. Instead of living passively according to societal pressures, he encourages them to ask essential questions. Why am I doing this? Does this pursuit truly lead to my growth? Does it bring lasting happiness or only temporary satisfaction? Such reflections can help youth distinguish between superficial goals and meaningful aspiration. Another central teaching of Socrates is know yourself. To Socrates, self-knowledge was the foundation of wisdom and virtue. In today's world, young people are constantly trapped in cycles of comparison, comparing their grades, comparing their physical strength, comparing their social status, even comparing their lives on the social media post. These unhealthy comparisons create unnecessary stress, envy, and feelings of inadequacy. Socratic self-knowledge empowers youth to recognize their unique strengths and limitations, to focus on personal growth rather than external validation, and to live authentically without measuring their worth against others. And the third conviction of Socrates is admitting one's own ignorance. He considered himself wise only because he considered the limits of his knowledge. In this Google generation or AI generation, where information is instantly accessible, youth often struggle to accept that not knowing is part of the human condition. Many are reluctant to appear ignorant or unnoticed, and instead they chase after superficial recognition. Socrates' humility teaches that acknowledging one's ignorance is the starting point of genuine learning and growth. For modern youth, this humility can open the door to curiosity, deeper inquiry, and resilience in the face of failure. For Socrates, true happiness is achieved not through wealth, pleasure, or power, but through the practice of virtue. Virtue for Socrates meant learning in accordance with justice, courage, moderation, and wisdom. This insight stands in stark contrast to the modern world where consumerism, violent media, and shallow entertainment often dominate the imagination of young people. Socratic philosophy reminds them that happiness rooted in material success or fleeting pleasures is fragile and unstable. Instead, by cultivating the inner virtue, young people can achieve a more stable and authentic form of happiness, one that neither social media trends nor external pressures can take away. What then must we do to live a virtuous and truly happy life? Socrates himself provides an answer through his dialectical method. For him, truth was not something imposed externally, but something already present within every individual. Knowledge is innate, and the role of the teacher or guide is simply to help uncover this truth by asking the right question. This method, later called the Socratic method or dialectic, involves disciplined practice of dialogue, reflection, and self-questioning. Applied to the struggles of modern youth, the dialectical method becomes a powerful tool. Instead of uncritically following trends and being carried away by peer pressure, young people are encouraged to pause and ask themselves essential questions. Is what I am doing truly good for me? Does this choice harm others? Is the happiness I seek real or lasting? Or is it merely temporary or superficial? These questions cultivate awareness, responsibility, and moral clarity. By engaging in this inner dialogue, youth can train themselves to look beyond instant gratifications, whether it comes in the form of higher social media likes, temporary pleasures, or the false prestige of outward appearances. Instead, they can discern actions that align with virtue, promote self-growth, and contribute to the well-being of others. In this way, the Socratic method not only nurtures wisdom, but also strengthens character, guiding the young generation toward a life that is both virtuous and genuinely fulfilling. In today's time, when youth are facing so many challenges, mental stress, peer pressure, unemployment, identity crisis, and other challenges, philosophy can act as a guiding light. The teachings of great philosophers remind us that life is not just about running behind success or wealth. It is about knowing oneself, thinking deeply, choosing wisely, and living meaningfully. If young people start learning and applying even a small part of philosophical thinking, they can build a better future, not only for themselves, but also for society. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin and Arul, for your enriching presentation. Now the floor is open for questions. Please note, those who are asking the questions, kindly introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Nishant. Introduce. All right, my question is going to be a little provocative. You gave a nice statistics for the stress that, the various reasons of stress that we have. Okay. But then I'm afraid that there is one aspect of the stress is ruled out. All the reasons you said, you seem to somehow make the youth responsible for the addiction to social media or whatever that is happening. But we live in a burnout society. There is so much of fatigue in us. That is because of the job stress that is given to us. You have to prove yourself in order you retain the job. And instead of saying you must do this, nowadays they say, well, you can do this. It sounds like motivation, but that is in fact driving you to work more, exhaust yourself. And for this, how this virtue becomes an antidote. I think something more may be needed if you take this comprehensive picture. Your response to this. Thank you.
And the factors for the stress of youth, what we mostly concentrate is widely from many researches was done by the previous researchers that most of the things are academic performances and social media influences and physical appearances. These are the most common factors that create stress among the youth, and the idea which you have suggested just now also could be the reason for that one. And
thank you for the wonderful presentations. I am Boiswaka Darlong. Yes, I do believe that philosophy is a beacon for the modern youth, yet we see the interest and participations are declining, as President rightly mentioned in the beginning itself. So my question is, what is your opinion? How can we convey the youth or even the high school students that philosophy is one of the ways where one can learn self-discipline for a better living?
actually, we can teach or we can give so many inputs like seminars and so many things from our part or from the institution part, and every institutions are doing those things. But it is up to the individual, how the individual is personalizing those things. For example, there is a fire. Everybody knows that fire will harm us. But it is, we prevent the child not to go to the fire, but only when the child goes and experiences that fire, and then it comes to the part of the life of the child that not to approach that fire. So approaching the philosophy or approaching the ideas of philosophy is one, the individual has to take the responsibilities to know more. Thank you.
I am Anthony Raj. Thank you for presenting a relevant philosophy today. First of all, you said the Socrates has come up with examining one's own life. Very helpful. And secondly, you said a dialectic approach, which is ongoing. So my question is, how shall we help today's youth to keep up this ongoing process?
This dialectic method is now, as we mentioned in the paper, many of our youngsters are busy with social media posts and then reels, and our task is helping them to think from their own side. First, the same dialectic method should affect my own life. If the question is, if a question is posed to me, which is affecting myself, like if I am using a mobile phone for a longer time, then if something is asked to me that, is it helpful for you to use the mobile phone continuously, or what are you going to gain from using this mobile phone, like that, personalized questions are asked means, then the fruit, the effect of the dialectic method will be good.
Thank you, Arun and Albin. With that, we conclude the first session of the paper presentation. I sincerely thank all the presenters for their valuable contributions and all of you for your active participation. Thank you.
Thank you, brothers, for your wonderful paper presentation. To express our heartfelt appreciation, I now invite Brother Jerome of Second Year Philosophy to kindly present mementos to the speakers. Also, thank you, moderator, Brother Colasso Wexter, for guiding this session. I now invite Brother Jerome of Second Year Philosophy to present a memento to the moderator as a token of our appreciation. Dear guests, please note, drinking water facilities will be available just outside the entrance of the auditorium and restrooms located to the left. Tea and snacks will be served just outside the entrance of the auditorium. We look forward to seeing you back by 11:15 for the next session. Thank you.
make it into a movie? Of course! Upgrade Google Gemini for free!
College students can now upgrade Google Gemini for free and get access to video generation, free storage up to 2 TB and more.
the ocean blue. Girl, I see that golden light in you. You move like waves upon the sand. One touch and I forget who I am. And I'm floating, no anchor needed. Your love's the air that I'm breathing. You're my sweet island breeze, cooling down my restless seas. Every whisper, every sigh feels like paradise tonight. You're my sweet island breeze, blowing gently through my dreams. Stay right here and never leave. Be my island, be my peace. Ukulele playing slow and fine. Stars are dancing in your eyes tonight. Barefoot love beneath the moon. Girl, I hope you're staying soon. And I'm drifting, yeah, I'm faded. In your arms I feel it.
We are delighted to have you back to the second session. Let us welcome Brother Hrithik Hazra, pursuing his studies in Licentiate in Philosophy, Pontifical Athenaeum, Jnanadeepa, as moderator for this session. A warm welcome to Brothers Abhijit George and Biren Lakra from Vishwajyoti Institute of Philosophy, Varanasi. They will present their paper on Moral Responsibility and Environmental Injustice, a philosophical reflection on the plight of the poor along the Ganga in Varanasi. Kindly welcome them with your applause.
Greetings of the ordinary season to all of you. It's my privilege to welcome you to season 2 of the Colloquium. Our session today brings together 3 rich and timely philosophical reflections on environmental justice, truth in public life, and the wisdom of indigenous cosmology. As Aristotle reminds us, begin in wonder. And today's paper invites us to wonder not in abstraction but in relation to real issue. Without much delay, we have with us Abhijit George and Biren Lakra. Please go and have your presentation. And the presentation is here.
Good morning to you all. I'm Brother Abhijit and he is Brother Biren. We represent the Vishwajyoti Institute of Philosophy, Varanasi, and the topic of our presentation is Moral Responsibility and Environmental Injustice, a philosophical reflection of the plight of the poor along the river Ganga in Varanasi. So here we begin our presentation. Introduction. Environmental injustice stands as both a global and local crisis. Unfortunately, the burden of environmental harm are borne by marginalized and poor communities who lack power and voice. The city like Varanasi with its geography along the river Ganga is representative of this injustice. It is revered spiritually at suffering ecological degradation that most adversely affects those who depend on the river most intimately, the poor. This paper seeks to explore how philosophy can illuminate these injustices, challenge narrow human-centered approaches, and restore a moral order that recognizes both the dignity of the poor and the sacredness of Ganga. Environmental injustice, a global and local crisis. Environmental injustice refers to the uneven distribution of environmental harm, wherein disadvantaged communities experience disproportionate pollution, disease, exposure, and ecological degradation. Globally, we see that climate change, toxic waste, and resource depletion affects poor nations far more severely than wealthier ones, despite the latter being the primary polluters. Locally, in cities like Varanasi, untreated sewage, industrial waste from tanners, and spiritual waste disproportionately impair the river. Yet, it is the poor who are the most dependent on these waters. Hence, environmental injustice is not a neutral scientific problem, but rather a manifestation of power, poverty, and social marginalization. Varanasi is sacred geography under threat. Varanasi holds profound significance within Hindu cosmology. The Ganga plays a central role in Hindu rituals of birth, marriage, and death. The Ganga is considered a goddess of purification and forgiveness. The Ganga is said to spring from the feet of Lord Vishnu and flows through Lord Shiva's hair before reaching the earth, which is why she is believed to carry the divine power to wash away impurities. A ritual immersion in Ganga is believed to cleanse sins and makes liberation possible. Even though the Ganga has its natural resilience, the alarmingly high volume of pollution poses an ever-increasing threat to the health and life of the river. The result is a symbolic contradiction, as the sacred river is treated in ways opposing to its revered status. The relevance of philosophy in the context of ecological crisis. As Thomas Berry, a well-known geologian, asserts, humanity has yet to develop a proper moral sense of biocide or geocide, the killing of life system and earth herself. He says that we have vocabularies for homicide and genocide, but not for the destruction of the ecosystem. Philosophy can illuminate why this absence persists through our metaphysical division between humanity and nature, our instrumental mentality, and our disregard for non-human intrinsic worth. Philosophy invites us to rethink these assumptions and recast moral responsibility in broader, more inclusive terms. Moral dimension of environmental degradation. Environmental degradation is both moral and systemic. Susan Griffin, a foundational figure in ecofeminism, critiques modern consciousness as one that fragments existence, which produces patterns of destruction that are neither random nor accidental. Humanity must expand their moral sense to include the earth herself as an object. Thus, justice in ecological context must encompass both humanity, humans and non-humans, present and future generations, and must address structural power. Human-centered morality versus ecocentric ethics. A human-centered ethics treats the natural world primarily as resource. In contrast, ecocentric ethics recognizes the interdependence of all life, affirming the intrinsic value of non-human beings and ecosystems. Environmental justice demands ecocentric perspectives in policy that treats all people and species with shared moral respect, moral responsibility, and future generations. Environmental justice insists that decisions today must account ethically for future generations' rights. The oblivious harm to ecosystems violate a moral obligation to those yet unborn and limits their access to a healthy habitat and resource. This aligns with eco-justice, outlines the equal responsibility with sustainability and equity across time. Varanasi and the Ganga, the sacred and the polluted. Varanasi embodies a unique union of the sacred and the ecological. where the Ganga is revered as both a goddess and a lifeline for millions. Yet, the modern industrial age has abused the very planet that nurtures us, and the Ganga's condition reflects this wider neglect. The river's spiritual importance is beyond dispute, but so too is its physical degradation, which is polluted by untreated sewage, industrial waste, and unmanaged byproducts of religious rituals. Cultural reverence versus ecological reality. Religious reverence does not necessarily translate into ecological stewardship. In Varanasi, rituals that honor the Ganga, such as immersion of offerings or cremation ceremonies, can contribute to pollution if waste is unmanaged. The moral question which arises is how sacred beliefs can be put into ways that support rather than degrade ecological integrity. Pollution of the Ganga, cause and consequence. In Varanasi, the Ganga is polluted by multiple sources as the infrastructure of the city fails of households with heavy metal